Lake Mead is at 1,045 feet above sea level today. The critical threshold, the elevation at which Hoover Dam loses 70% of its ability to generate electricity, is 1,035 feet. That is 10 feet away. At the current rate of decline, measured in inches per day as summer demand peaks and evaporation accelerates across 247 square miles of open desert water, the nation's largest reservoir is on a trajectory that federal water managers are no longer debating. Tom Bushatsky, the director of Arizona's Department of Water Resources, said it plainly in May. "We're going to go to 1,035. There's no question that's going to happen." The Bureau of Reclamation's most recent projections place Lake Mead at 1,020 feet by July 2027. That would be more than 20 feet below the all-time record low set in 2022. And the 7 states that share this water cannot agree on what happens next. The operating rules that have governed the Colorado River for nearly 2 decades expire at the end of this year. This is the story of a dam, a reservoir, a drought, and a governance failure that have been converging for 26 years and are now 10 feet apart. To understand what Lake Mead means, you have to understand what it took to build it. Congress authorized the Hoover Dam in 1928 and construction completed in 1936, a 726-foot curved arch of concrete spanning Black Canyon on the Nevada-Arizona border, the largest dam ever built at the time. The reservoir it created, Lake Mead, took 6 years to fill. When it reached full pool for the first time in the early 1940s, it was the largest artificial lake on Earth. In July 1983, during a period of exceptional snowmelt in the Rocky Mountains, the lake reached its all-time recorded high of 1,225 feet, within 4 feet of its maximum capacity of 1,229. Since the year 2000, it has not come close to that level again. 26 years of megadrought have reduced Lake Mead's level by roughly 180 feet from that 1983 peak. Today it sits at 35% of its total capacity, a number that would have seemed unthinkable to the engineers who designed the system. The evidence of those missing feet is visible to anyone who approaches the dam. A white calcium carbonate ring lines the canyon walls above the waterline, a geological record of where the water used to be, stretching in places more than 150 feet above the current surface. It is one of the most dramatic visual indicators of long-term drought anywhere in the United States. Below the current waterline, the lake conceals an older story. When Lake Mead was first filled in the 1930s, it swallowed a Mormon settlement called St. Thomas, Nevada. In 2022, as the lake hit its previous record low, that ghost town resurfaced. Buildings, foundations, and streets visible again for the first time in decades. It is now submerged again, but by far less water than in 1983. The Colorado River that feeds Lake Mead was divided among 7 western states by the Colorado River Compact of 1922. That agreement allocated 15 million acre-feet of water per year across the basin. There was one problem with that allocation that took decades to fully emerge. The river does not produce 15 million acre-feet per year. It produces closer to 12 million. The compact was negotiated during what climate scientists have since identified as one of the wettest periods in the past 1,200 years, a statistical anomaly that was mistaken, at the time, for a baseline. The result is a system that has been structurally overcommitted since before the first turbine at Hoover Dam ever spun. The crisis entered its most acute phase in the winter of 2025 to 2026. Snowpack in the Rocky Mountains, the primary source of Colorado River water, came in at record low levels for the second consecutive year. The Bureau of Reclamation, which manages Lakes Mead and Powell together as an integrated system, responded in April 2026 by reducing water releases from Lake Powell by 20%. That decision was made not to help Lake Mead, but to protect Glen Canyon Dam's own infrastructure from the consequences of its own declining reservoir. The 2 largest dams on the Colorado River were both rationing at the same time. Lake Mead crossed 1,050 feet on June 7th, entering what the federal shortage framework calls a Tier 2 shortage declaration. Utilities in Arizona, Nevada, and California received formal notification that additional water cuts were coming. In the weeks since, the lake has continued falling. As of today, it stands at 1,045 feet. The number that matters is 1,035. Hoover Dam operates 17 turbines. They are not all designed for the same range of water pressure. When Lake Mead's surface drops below 1,035 feet, the reduction in what engineers call head, the vertical distance between the water surface and the turbines, becomes too great for 12 of those 17 turbines to operate efficiently. They go offline, not all at once, but as the water surface drops below the specific intake elevation each unit requires, they stop generating. The net result is a 70% reduction in the dam's hydroelectric output. To understand why that threshold is so consequential, you need to understand how hydroelectric power actually works. A dam does not burn anything. It does not use fuel. It converts the potential energy of water at height into electricity by letting that water fall through turbines on its way down. The higher the water surface above the turbines, the greater the pressure at the intake, and the more electricity each gallon of flowing water can generate. This vertical measurement, the head, is the single most important variable in a hydroelectric facility's output. Hoover Dam's turbines were designed to operate with a head between approximately 420 and 590 feet. At 1,035 feet of surface elevation, the head falls below the operating range of 12 of those 17 units. Below 950 feet, where the Bureau of Reclamation is installing 3 new turbines for $52 million, even those emergency units stop producing. At 895 feet, the lake reaches what is called dead pool, the elevation at which water can no longer reach the dam's lowest intake pipes. At dead pool, Hoover Dam generates no electricity and releases no water downstream. For 40 million people across 7 states and Mexico who depend on the Colorado River, that is not a metaphor. It is the end of the system. The Bureau of Reclamation's $52 million emergency investment buys some protection in the 950 to 1,035 range. What it does not fix is the structural gap. The 12 turbines that go offline at 1,035 feet were designed for a river that no longer reliably delivers the water that design assumed. Hoover Dam's generating capacity is already 40 to 50% lower than it was in the year 2000, when the lake was last near full. The turbines have not changed. The river has. The consequences of crossing 1,035 feet will land immediately on power grids across the Southwest. Nevada, Arizona, and California utilities currently depend on Hoover Dam for a portion of their baseload electricity, cheap, dispatchable hydropower that responds to demand within minutes, unlike solar or wind. When that capacity is cut by 70%, utilities are not left with a gap they can quietly absorb. They must replace it on the open market, typically with natural gas generation, at prices that fluctuate sharply during summer heat peaks, precisely the conditions under which the shortage will be most acute. The Western Electricity Coordinating Council has been running computer simulations of what happens to the regional grid if Hoover Dam's output collapses simultaneously with a heat wave or a major wildfire. Those models do not produce reassuring results. The people of Las Vegas, 2.4 million residents who get approximately 90% of their drinking water from Lake Mead, are better protected than the headline suggests. The Southern Nevada Water Authority spent $1.5 billion over 7 years building a new water intake tunnel drilled beneath the lake bed to an elevation of 860 feet, well below even the dead pool threshold. Las Vegas can access water even if the lake drops to levels that would stop Hoover Dam from functioning, and per capita water use in the Las Vegas Valley has fallen 58% since 2002, even as the population grew. The more exposed users are agriculture and the urban systems in Arizona and California that have not built the same redundancy. Approximately 4.5 million acres of farmland across the basin depend on Colorado River water, about 70% of all deliveries. The Imperial Valley of California, which produces a large share of the nation's winter vegetables, sits at the end of that allocation line. Running alongside the physical crisis is a governance crisis with its own countdown. The 2007 Colorado River Interim Guidelines, the operating rules that determine how shortage cuts are distributed among the 7 basin states, expire at the end of 2026. The 2019 drought contingency plans that supplemented them also expire. The 7 states are negotiating a replacement framework, but as of June 2026, lower basin states and upper basin states remain at an impasse over the core question: who bears the largest cuts when the river cannot meet everyone's demand? If no agreement is reached by December 31st, the legal and operational vacuum that follows would be unprecedented. There are 3 numbers scientists and water managers are watching. The first is Lake Mead's daily elevation reading, specifically the date it crosses 1,035 feet. Bureau of Reclamation projections suggest this could happen as early as late August 2026, depending on summer temperatures and upstream inflows. The second is whether the 7-state Colorado River negotiations produce a signed agreement before the December 31st expiration of the current guidelines. Without a replacement, disputes over who cuts how much would likely move to federal courts, adding legal uncertainty to an already fragile physical system. The third is winter snowpack in the Rocky Mountains. It is the only natural variable in this system that can reverse the trajectory. 2 consecutive record-low winters have driven the lake to where it stands today. One strong winter would not recover what has been lost, but it could buy time. A third record low winter would not. There is one number above all others that water managers are watching upstream: Lake Powell's surface elevation, currently above its own minimum power pool of 3,490 feet, but by a margin that has been shrinking. If both Lake Powell and Lake Mead cross their critical thresholds in the same season, the Colorado River's two largest generating facilities would lose the majority of their output simultaneously. Grid operators are not planning for that scenario to happen. They are planning for what they would do if it did. The bathtub ring on the canyon walls above Lake Mead is not just a photograph. It is a measurement. It marks where the system was designed to operate. The water surface below it marks where the system is. The distance between them is the 26-year record of a river being consumed faster than it can be replenished. And that distance is still growing. Subscribe to stay ahead of what's coming.